Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into something, pretty mind-blowing, actually.
We really are.
Discoveries that are making us, well, rethink what we thought we knew about human history. Like, really rethink it.
Especially when people first arrived here in the Americas.
Exactly. We're focusing on some incredible evidence from, kind of an unexpected place.
Yeah, definitely unexpected. And we're going to unpack some brand new research. There's a paper just out in Science Advances. Plus, look back at the earlier work on these ancient footprints.
Right. So our mission today is to sort of dig into this new evidence, see how solid it is, and, understand why it's shaking things up so much.
It really is a major shift.
So let's set the scene. You really need to picture White Sands, New Mexico. Have you ever seen pictures? It's just...
Oh, it's stunning.
Utterly surreal, right? These endless rolling dunes, but they're not sand like you think of at a beach. It's a fine beige gypsum.
Yeah, basically remnants from ancient seas that dried up. It's this vast white desert.
And it's a national park, beautiful place. But here's the twist part of it, is also a U.S. Army missile range.
Which adds a whole other layer of intrigue, doesn't it? Not exactly the first place you'd think to look for ancient human signs.
Not at all. But that's where this story really kicks off, with an archaeologist and geologist, Vance Holliday from the University of Arizona.
Right, Holliday. So back in 2012, he was invited out there.
What was he doing initially? Just general geology stuff?
Pretty much. He was looking at geological layers, trying to get a better timeline for the area's past. There were these trenches already dug by other researchers.
Okay.
And apparently, almost just out of curiosity, he asked if he could check out a site that was actually on the missile range part, normally off limits.
Wow, lucky break.
You won't believe how lucky he and a grad student were meticulously studying these layers in the trenches.
Yeah.
And they had no idea, none at all, that just about 100 yards away, like literally a football field.
No.
Yeah. Buried under the gypsum, preserved in clay, were these ancient human footprints. Just waiting. History right there.
That's incredible. Just 100 yards. So when were they actually found then?
Well, the excavation happened later, in 2019. Researchers from Bournemouth University in the UK and the National Park Service did the main dig.
Okay.
And they published the first big paper in 2021. And Holliday, because of his earlier geological work there in 2012...
The work near the trenches.
Exactly. That data turned out to be key for helping figure out the age of the footprints. So he ended up as a co-author on that paper.
Right, it all connects. So what was the big reveal? How old were these prints?
This is where it gets really interesting, like you said, for your understanding of history. The dating pointed to humans being there between 23,000 and 21,000 years ago.
23,000? Hold on.
Yeah.
But the Clovis sites, they're what, 13,000 years old? Something like that?
Roughly, yes. Clovis culture. Found near Clovis, New Mexico, ironically not too far away, that was always seen as the benchmark, the sort of first Americans around 13,000 years ago.
But these footprints are 10,000 years older.
Pretty much, 10 millennia older, which, completely challenged that whole Clovis first idea that had dominated for decades.
Okay, yeah. I can see why that would cause a stir. A 10,000-year difference is huge. What was the reaction? People must have pushed back hard on that 2021 paper.
Oh, absolutely. There was intense debate, healthy scientific skepticism.
What was the main sticking point?
It mostly came down to the dating method. They had used ancient seeds and pollen found in the same layers as the footprints for the radiocarbon dating.
Okay. And the problem was?
Skeptics argued, well, maybe those seeds and pollen weren't truly from the exact same time. Maybe they got washed in later, or the dates were off somehow. Could they really trust dating based on that plant material?
Okay. That sounds like a reasonable scientific question to ask. So how did Holliday's team respond to that? That's a pretty fundamental challenge.
Well, they took it seriously. And they went back, not just to the lab, but back to White Sands itself.
Fieldwork.
Exactly. And this leads to the brand new study, the one just published in Science Advances this past week, June 18th, 2025. Led by Holliday again.
And this one directly addresses those dating concerns.
Head on. They really upped the rigor this time.
How so? What did they do differently?
Okay, so instead of relying only on the seeds and pollen, they focused on dating the ancient mud itself, the sediment that actually encased the footprints.
Right, the matrix material.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And, crucially, they used a totally independent lab for the radiocarbon analysis to avoid any hint of bias.
Good move.
Plus, Holliday and a doctoral candidate, Jason Windingstad, they went back out in 2022 and 2023. They weren't just retesting old stuff. They dug completely new trenches
New trenches.
to get an even closer, more detailed look at the geology, the layers, the stratigraphy, making absolutely sure the samples were locked in context.
Okay, so new material, independent lab, more field work. Sounds thorough. What did the new dates show? Did they match the old ones?
They matched almost perfectly. The mud dated between 20,700 and 22,400 years old, right in the same ballpark as the original findings.
Wow.
But here's the really compelling part. Think about the consistency now. You've got the original seeds, you've got pollen, now you have the mud itself. That's 3 different types of material.
Right.
And the dating analyses. They've been done by 3 different independent labs now, across the 2 studies.
Okay.
And all together, between the 2 research groups, there are now 55 consistent radiocarbon dates, all pointing to that same time frame.
55. Okay, that's a lot of consistent data points.
It really is.
Yeah.
Holliday himself said it's a remarkably consistent record. He also said, you get to the point where it's really hard to explain all this away. It would be serendipity in the extreme to have all these dates giving you a consistent picture that's in error.
Yeah, with 55 dates across different materials and labs. Serendipity in the extreme sounds about right. It's hard to argue with that level of agreement.
It becomes very, very difficult.
So this really solidifies things then. It changes the timeline. What does that feel like for the researchers? Jason Winningstad, the doctoral candidate you mentioned.
Yeah, Winningstad put it really well. He said, it's a strange feeling. You realize that it basically contradicts everything that you've been taught about the peopling of North America.
Wow. I mean, yeah, everything you learned in school, basically. So what does this mean for your understanding, for everyone's understanding of history now?
Well, it's a fundamental shift. It means humans were successfully living, or at least passing through North America, during the absolute height of the last ice age, the last glacial maximum, a much harsher environment than previously thought for the first arrivals.
Right. Colder, massive ice sheets still around.
Exactly. It opens up huge questions about how they got here. Maybe coastal routes were more important earlier on. It just shows incredible adaptability and resilience much, much earlier than the standard story allowed. These were serious survivors.
Incredible. But, okay, even with, 55 consistent dates, science being science, are there still lingering questions? What are critics still asking Holliday?
Yeah, there's still one main point that comes up, even with the dating looking so solid now.
Which is?
Where are the artifacts?
Mm.
If people were there, why haven't we found tools, campsites, butchered animal bones, the typical stuff archaeologists find?
Ah, right. The lack of associated stuff. That's a fair question. Is this explanation peer-reviewed yet, though?
That's a key point.
Mm.
His explanation for why there aren't artifacts, it's logical. But it hasn't gone through formal peer review itself yet. It's more his interpretation based on the context.
Okay, so what is his interpretation? How does he explain the missing debris field, so to speak?
His argument is pretty logical,
Mm-hmm.
based on the tracks themselves and hunter-gatherer behavior. He points out that many of the uncovered trackways are quite short. Like, someone walked across that specific patch of mud in maybe just a few seconds.
Okay, so they weren't hanging around there for long.
Probably not.
Mm-hmm.
Right there. And he argues, think about hunter-gatherers in a likely resource-scarce Ice Age environment, especially if they're far from places to get new stone for tools or other materials.
Yeah.
They would be incredibly careful not to lose or discard valuable things. You wouldn't just drop your spear point or your scraper tool randomly. As Holliday put it, they're not just randomly dropping artifacts. It's not logical to me that you're going to see a debris field.
That makes sense. You conserve your resources. These weren't campsites. They were pathways, people just moving through.
That's the idea. Fleeting moments preserved, not long occupations, right on those spots.
Okay, that's a plausible explanation for why you'd find footprints, but maybe not a lot of other stuff right with them. And Holliday seems pretty confident now.
Oh, absolutely. He basically said he never really doubted the original dates because the evidence they had was already consistent. And now, he says, we have direct data from the field, and a lot of it now. The confidence is definitely there, backed by a mountain of data.
Yeah, you can hear it. It's a testament to that careful, persistent scientific work, answering the critics by just digging deeper, literally.
Exactly. That's how science should work, ideally. New findings, scrutiny, more data, revised understanding.
So, wrapping this up then, the White Sands footprints, especially with this new dating confirmation, they really do solidify this major rethink. Humans in the Americas, thousands, maybe 10,000 years earlier than we used to think.
It cements a new chapter, for sure. A much earlier chapter in the human story of this continent.
And it leaves you wondering, doesn't it? Holliday made that comment. The rest is buried under the world's biggest pile of gypsum sand.
Right. It's provocative.
What else is buried out there? Not just at White Sands, but anywhere. What other stories are hidden, waiting to maybe completely change the picture again?
And maybe, what can something as simple, as ephemeral as a footprint in mud tell us? What kind of stories can that kind of evidence reveal about ancient lives, about journeys that maybe broken tools or old bones alone can't? It's a fascinating thought to end on.
It really is. Something simple, leaving such a huge mark on our understanding.